Rickson Gracie is the third son of Helio Gracie, who along with Carlos Gracie is considered to be one of the forefathers of the Brazilian style of jiu-jitsu. For a lot of people, he's the most accomplished of Helio's sons, despite his brother Royce famously being the first champion of the UFC. At the time of his retirement, Rickson held a perfect 11-0 MMA record, and today he's one of just a handful of red belts in the world. He also happens to be my first teacher's teacher. Shout out to Taka-sensei in Tokyo. Let's take a look at his training, which I'm basing off of the footage which is available online. The most famous is training taken from the documentary Choke, which you'll see here, but there are also some other videos of workouts which quite frankly are so grainy and distorted they're unwatchable. So I'll talk about them, but you'll just have to take my word for it in this video. To sum up Rickson's training, I'll repeat a phrase to you that my first mentor in coaching used to tell me again and again, which is that your greatest strength eventually becomes your biggest weakness. When you're so good at something, you end up leaning on it to such an extent that it creates a gap somewhere else, in my opinion. If you look at what jiu-jitsu practitioners are really good at, it's creating stiffness, rigidity, and tension in their bodies. We're good at straining and expressing isometric strength, and that makes sense when you consider all the actions that require these qualities: framing, posting, pressure passing, breaking grips, squeezing submissions, and so on. But taken too far, these can all cause problems: reduced flexibility, less than ideal posture, for want of a better word, stiff movement that makes it hard to more easily switch between different movement patterns and contraction types. I think I've mentioned it in other videos before, but the ability to quickly relax muscle was actually more strongly correlated with performance than the speed of contraction among Soviet athletes back in the day. Because all of the sexy stuff in sport tends to happen during contraction, I think we forget the value of relaxation and fluidity in Western training. To me, that is the biggest value of the way that Rickson trained, with the yoga, the animal patterns, the calisthenics. And you can see that even 30 plus years ago, he was mindful of the importance of things like neck training to maintain health and performance. I also appreciate the emphasis that he placed on breath control. As I've said before, there's a cyclical relationship between breathing and fatigue when we exercise. You feel hunger for air, which makes you breathe harder and faster, which makes you feel more hunger for air, and the cycle goes around. I think the net result of his programming was that he was more physically well-rounded and healthier as an athlete than he might have been had he not trained in this manner. On the downside, we can't ignore physics. All the skill and tactics in the world still needs force behind it to be effective, especially as your opponents narrow the tactical technical gap. You can't develop the kind of physical qualities that achieve this with the kind of training that Rickson was performing back in the day. I suspect that his performances then weren't a result of his physical training, rather a result of the massive gap in the skill between him and his opponents. MMA and jiu-jitsu has evolved in the intervening years, and just like the tactics that won a UFC 1 would not work today, athletes performing zero heavy or fast lifting in their programming would likely be as harshly punished in MMA, and I think it's going that way in jiu-jitsu too. And although there are lots of other factors to consider, I would say that the model probably needs to be updated a little. Nonetheless, Rickson is still on the Mount Rushmore of jiu-jitsu. Thanks.